We are recording. All right. And we have a live studio audience for this special occasion. Man, this is, geez, the 5th or 6th ResourceXchange that we've been able to hold. But our most special guest, Kirsten Wyatt, is here today, live right before the holidays. This is like our version, SNL does their holiday bash. This is like we're pulling out all the stops.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Let's bring all the joy and happiness.
Awesome. Kirsten, thank you so much for being here with us. And the purpose of these exchanges is to bring a sense of community, certainly in 2020, but we fully plan to keep doing these throughout 2021. We've had practitioners of the work that we do, but also leaders within local government. And you are certainly that. And we're so thankful to have this relationship with you that we've had and enjoyed for so many years. So happy holidays, and we'll get going.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, probably the most important question that we'll get to today is who won the Wyatt household cookie bake-off competition over the weekend?
So I am pleased to report that it was me. And I am not a baker. And so like when I have to bake, I get really, really anxious about it. I take it really seriously, but I crowdsourced my recipe from the ELGL family. Libby Brettenauer, who's a budget director down in Manhattan Beach, California, sent me a recipe for peanut butter reindeer cookies. And the reason I won was because of my presentation. My family agreed that they looked the cutest, even though some of their entries tasted really, really good. So, but I got to pick the dinner on Monday night, and we had Thai food.
Tell me about this evaluation process. Like, are there criteria? Who votes? Who weighs in?
So it was so we gave the cookies out to our neighborhood, and I wanted to have them, be able to vote. But then my family decided, no, we all had to vote for somebody's cookie. You couldn't vote for your own. And so then we all were being really nice to each other and voting. Everyone got a vote. And then we decided the tiebreaker was presentation, because Kent decided to make all of his cookies and like put them all on one cookie sheet. And so then they all just kind of bled into each other. And so even though they tasted good, they looked awful. So that's why I was able to secure the victory.
Wow. And it's straight up cookie scoring, like yes. we would know in the PBB community.
Exactly. And we were able to just prioritize in different ways, like appearance versus taste. We even kind of factored in complexity. My daughter used a cake mix rather than doing it from scratch. And so we factored those things in. So I knew that you all would appreciate it.
We very much appreciate it. And your methodology is just perfect.
Good. I'm glad you approve.
From the culinary to literary, we're always interested in what our participants are reading. Two questions. I'll start with, What do you have a favorite book?
So I don't know if you knew this, but every year on our Christmas card for our family, we all list our favorite books of the year. And so like starting from when our daughters were really young, like, back then they were picking like Elephant and Piggy, like those types of books. But we all four of us list our favorite books. And so I'll tell you my favorite book of 2020. How about that?
Perfect.
And it was A Very Punchable Face by Colin Jost. And he's the lead writer and the host of Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. And it was great. It was my favorite book of the year. Just a really well done memoir. And so I highly recommend it.
It's a memoir.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I know your last guest on ResourceXchange talked about memoirs, and totally agreed with her assessment. It's kind of a way to get into somebody else's life. But what I liked about it, and what I think is applicable to local government and communications, is he talked a lot about managing people, and especially managing creative people. And then he also talked a lot about his writing process of becoming a better writer. And so I loved those two aspects, because I think, as we think about managing people and programs in government, it's always good to kind of reflect on ways to do that. And then obviously we all strive to be better writers, and, he really takes writing seriously. So And it's just super funny. I actually listened to the audiobook, and I would listen to it while I was running. And there's nothing creepier than someone running and like laughing out loud at the same time. But that was me because it was so good.
Without a, super spoiler alert, what's the background on Punchable Face?
It's just his like way of describing himself, of kind of being like a white kid from Staten Island, and he got into a really prestigious Manhattan prep school, and so on a given school day he would have to take a bus, a ferry, and the subway to get to school, and it took him 2 hours each way, but it was worth it because of the education he received. But he's pretty self-effacing, and just making fun of himself, and that he's just kind of this Harvard educated rich kid, supposedly, but then he has this really fascinating backstory.
Wow.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, fun fact, Mike, Seaman, and I used to ride the same school bus to high school together. I'll follow up with Mike about his educational takeaways from our public transportation experiences. Kirsten, same theme. You just gave a book recommendation, but do you have another? We had it specifically just, what other book recommendation would you have for people besides just your favorite?
I have to admit that I read very little management books or like business books. And I've tried really hard over the years, but I tend to just read like fiction and nonfiction. And I've definitely tried to read, especially like management books, but it's just not my favorite thing to read. But the only exception I'll say is I really appreciate the book Radical Candor. And I don't know if you've read it, but it's really about, and it's developed, it's a theory or kind of concept developed about how you can be very truthful and very honest and very direct as a way to be a better manager, a better team player, and how you can avoid something that they call ruinous empathy, which is being too compassionate and accepting versus not telling someone what you really think. And so I've read it a couple of times, and I find it to be really helpful, especially as a woman in leadership, because it just reminds you, throughout the book, that being clear is being kind. And if you're not saying exactly what you think, and if you're trying to couch it with too many niceties, you lose your effectiveness. And so I would recommend, since this audience is a local government audience and then thinking about management, Radical Candor is a great book, and it's something I think anyone could put into use, even if your style of communication is already really direct.
Wow. Ruinous Empathy is heavy.
Yep. And and the book really gets into some examples. It's written by a woman who, worked at a lot of really big, Fortune 500 tech companies, and, really came from a place of, you can think you're being so supportive of an employee, but you're really not doing them any favors if you are avoiding hard conversations or being, very supportive, yet also honest, when you're giving constructive feedback. And so I found that to be really helpful.
Wow. And it fits so well into the heart of ELGL in terms of a lot of the mission that you take on. And we'll get to some of those questions here in just a second, but you embody that in the work that you do. You are tackling issues that are extremely important and hard to talk about the right way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think sometimes when we think about ways when we're trying to do things differently or promote change, sometimes we want to like tiptoe into those conversations, or we want to say like, oh, I know the way you've been doing it is so great. And, you don't want to hurt someone's feeling by coming in and like steamrolling them. But at the same time, sometimes just being direct and being honest is what people really appreciate, because it makes them feel valued. And so that's why I like the book. And I found myself like almost immediately changing the way that I would speak, or the ways that I would enter into conversations, so I could be a little bit more direct, but also, still being kind, which I think is so important.
Wow, man, thank you for that.
Yes.
I thought maybe you already gave your book recommendation, but that you gave us on both ends of the spectrum. Those are both awesome.
Good, thank you.
Well, we already talked about Bake Off and radical candor. I'm gonna bounce around a little bit in some of the questions from the work side and the personal side. And this is like, I wonder how radical candor is going to fit into your evolution. We've known each other for quite some time. I mean, we were so lucky. I remember when Eric was on Twitter. Twitter was seemingly new to us, and had the first exchange back with ELGL. We were like, holy cow, man, we have made it.
Well, that's how we felt about like partnering with all of you as well. So that's nice to hear.
But we were lucky enough to get to know you back from our earliest days. And just for the benefit of those who are tuning in, can you tell us a little bit about your story and your pathway to creating ELGL to what it is today?
Sure. So Kent and I lived in Richmond, Virginia. We both worked for the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I got a new job out in Oregon, working in finance, local government finance. And so we moved across the country, and we didn't know anybody in Oregon. It took Kent about 6 months to find a job. And so, once he got settled and, I was in my position, we realized that there really wasn't a network that was open to us, as people who were new to Oregon. Were kind of like middle management. I was in finance, he was in planning. And there wasn't a place for us to connect with other people working in local government. And the Portland metro area is very dense. So like cities are right on top of each other. And it just seemed bizarre that we could be working for these communities and not know anybody. And so one day Kent said, let's get a group of people together for lunch that work in local government. And like, I have to fully admit, like, I am not the most outgoing person. And so at first I was like, I don't want to have lunch with people that I don't know. Like, I just want to stay in my office and do my work. And he was like, no, this is important. Think about our adjustment to the state and like what it would have been like if we had had a network. And so we organized this lunch. We had 16 people show up, people working in all aspects of government. We had city managers and we had planners, and we were there, and everyone just had such a good time that we said, okay, well, let's do it next month. And then we started just meeting every month, and we started bringing in guest speakers to talk about different, trending topics in Oregon local government. And the lunches started to grow. We had, 40 to 50 people at each one. So then we just added some communications aspects. People could stay connected in between the lunches. And as time went on, we just saw this real need for people to have a place to connect authentically about local government, that didn't care what your job title was, what your job function was, if you were the head of the agency or if you were a student. And so we just kept that going and started to build out content and ways to share information that went above and beyond having to meet in person. And so, social media became a huge aspect of that, of connecting people together. And then in 2013, we held our first conference. And then over time, just continued to grow the organization to welcome anybody who wanted to join, to be part of the conversations and part of the learning and the information sharing. And so since we started the organization, with 16 people at lunch, we have about 5,000 members now. And we're all over across the country in every state. We're in Canada and the UK, Australia and Israel. And so, we've really kind of stuck to that initial vision of being Big Tent and saying, you can work for a private company, you can be an MPA student, you can be a mayor. Everybody's welcome, everybody's voice is valued. Everybody, has a contribution to make in local government. So let's be the place to convene and assemble those people to make a difference in the world. So it's been a really fun journey to watch this organization grow. And then I've been running the organization full time for about 3 years now. And so it's been fun to also work and grow an organization in that staff capacity too.
Incredible. Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
And it strikes me even hearing it, and I thought I know the story. When in your evolution did it move from a place to network? That was a value proposition. Let's get some folks together for lunch because we're in a dense metro area and we should know each other. To really making it a powerful impact on mission issues. I would love to hear about, that's like a bold step towards like,
Right.
hey, we're getting to know each other, towards we together can make a difference.
I think pretty early on, one thing that we observed about some of the legacy professional associations was that learning and information sharing seemed to happen like very sporadically, and it required a certain amount of privilege to participate in. And so, that looked like conferences that were held midweek at like a golf resort. And so like to kind of fit into that culture, you had to like, one, like have a budget that allowed you to attend, and then two, be a golfer, and then three, then like in a lot of cases like have a job title that allowed them to like welcome you to attend. And so you had these kind of like point in time ways that people were sharing information. And you could bring in an amazing speaker, but that's like one conference, once a year. Or, you might have like a monthly like paper newsletter, but then you have to be on the list, and then you have to like participate in, be a member of that organization to get that information. And, the saying that we've always had is that local government is like the original open source network. Like everything that government does can and should be shared. And so why do we limit learning to being a once a year event that you have to like pay a lot of money to attend? Like, why can't we be sharing information as freely as we can? Because the work we do is accessible to anybody. And then on top of that, like, why not celebrate people at all levels of government? Because it's not like there's just one person that makes a government program successful. Why not ask the planner or the financial analyst to like tell their role in that story? And so pretty quickly, even though, we are a membership organization, we definitely view ourselves as a content organization as well. And so putting together training and program and podcasts and webinars and conferences that throughout the year give people a chance to learn became really important to us, because this work is hard. And so you need to be able to call on experts and resources when you need it, or you need to be able to go to a website and use our search function and find, that great article that was written by that finance analyst 2 years ago. And so for us, it was really that concept of like continuous learning, and also the fact that, digital communication makes it so easy for us to, reach out to people and say, tell us your story, and then turn that around and then push it out and share it. And we felt like too, that just broke down some of those concepts of privilege of who gets that information, who gets that knowledge. And so really making it open and accessible to everybody became really important as well.
Just as you were talking, when you say this work is hard, simply acknowledging that, and then inviting content creators in this open source way to say, yes, that's truth. And
yes.
So I think that's so attractive about what you guys have done, what you all have done. Sorry, jargon, but the idea that if you start there and you say, this is not easy, and now we're at a different level of, okay, so now we can talk openly and honestly. And I want to use that segue to your equity and inclusion efforts. Clearly, they're at the heart of your mission. They're at the heart of everything that you just described.
Right.
And I'd love to know more about the specific programs you've initiated to promote this goal, especially the diversity dashboard, but not limited to that.
Right. This is kind of a cheesy story, but bear with me. When we had our oldest daughter, When she was about to turn 1, and she was going to get baptized at our church, and we were talking to our pastor, and he had made a comment that what kids really need, they don't need to have like baby yoga, and they don't need to have like the most expensive stroller. But what he had said was, what every kid needs is they need to know at any point in time that they have 5 people in the world who love them.
Mm.
And like that really stuck with me, because when we think about this work being hard, or when we think about, when you're in a job and you have a boss who's a jerk, or you have a coworker who is racist, or you have a counselor who is sexist, if you feel like you have a support network that you can turn to, if you have 5 people that believe in you, or that are doing the same work as you, or that can commiserate with what you're doing, the likelihood that you're going to be able to power through and get through, a tough situation, or a tough project, or a tough coworker is so much greater. And so when I think about like building networks, it's really at the heart of making sure that everyone in local government feels valued, and that if you don't look just like me or just like you, that you can still find those 5 people that support you and love you, and they're going to keep you in public service even when times get tough. And so, a huge part of that was starting to tell the story about what does local government look like, and where are there parts of the country where they're doing a better job getting more diverse people into local government. And so we started the Diversity Dashboard Project, which collects the demographics of local government leaders nationwide, and then shares that again very freely in a way that tells a story about, is local government reflective of the communities that they serve. And so we've been pretty frank about the fact that in most parts of the country, the demographics of local government leadership, especially at that city manager level, do not reflect the communities that they serve. But then this year we started to collect data on department head level positions. GFOA, the Finance Officers Association, which I know you work closely with, they've done a tremendous job over the years of really focusing on getting more women and people of color into finance director roles. And so we're starting to see that bear out in the data. But for us, it's just about making sure that local government is welcoming, and that we have not just, not that we just say we want to be diverse, but that we're actually, taking a good hard look at the data and saying, does this reflect the type of diverse organizations that we want to be? And so we're pretty quick to call people out that, host conferences and have all male panels, or that just call on the same, 4 white people to talk about projects that they talked about at the last conference. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we diversify our content, our speakers, our board, our staff, to reflect our membership. And so really try to live those values as well. But it all really comes down to making sure that our members feel that they have a place, and that they feel like welcome and valued, and that they have those 5 people that they can depend on when they need it, in this line of work.
It's super powerful. I didn't know that. You call it a cheesy story, but it's not. It's a sticky concept, no different than Gladwell's 10,000 hours or something like that. It's, do you have 5 people who you can count on to help you have the courage to push forward for something that you know is right? And man, that is ELGL. I think that is unique to what you've brought to so many of these issues like equity and inclusion, which this year in 2020, it is a powerful year to say the least.
Well, and I have to say, we were, you all were the first organization that invited ELGL like as a legitimate group. I think it was in 2014 we came to your summit, and like even what you do with your customers, or with the local governments you work with, which is they're not just working with you, but they're part of a community that they're learning from, and that they were in that conference room to learn alongside of. I think that type of thing was really also impactful and influential for us, because I remember Kent and Ben and I were there, and we had a chance to see all of these people who were working with you, that were learning from each other, and they were having fun together. And I think that building those types of networks, whether it's, okay, how are we, working with ResourceX, or how are we part of a larger local government community? Like, we just want to seek out people that can be that network for us. And I think you all have done that so well. And I mean, now with the ResourceXchange, I think it's just a phenomenal way of helping people just have that context, into the work that they do.
Wow. It is meaningful. You take budget, you can enter this from any angle, from the planner side with Kent, from financial analysts that you talked about, where Maggie comes from. We like budget because it's, you talk about your priorities with where you put your resources. You talk about resources. Another word for it is currency. Currency is energy. And there's a reason to associate these conversations around where the resources go, where the energy is. And so bringing that out of a accountant's language to something that is much more broad, like, where do the resources need to go? They need to go towards equity and inclusion and diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what we have also realized is we have so many members that want to make a difference in the world. They want to progress in their careers. And they also don't want the career that maybe their father or their grandfather had. They recognize that this very linear path from, graduate student to city manager, or graduate student to finance director, that's not the path that they want to have, but they still want to accomplish those big, great things. And so what we have found is throwing at our members, the chance to learn from people like you over the years is hugely valuable. Because let's say they're a librarian right now. It doesn't mean that they don't need to have those conversations and learn about budget and prioritization and how a budget is an expression of policy. Will they become a finance director someday? Maybe not, but do they become a better head librarian or assistant city manager because they've had this exposure? Absolutely. And I think, kind of this old way of saying, okay, you only get this information because you have this title. We've just really wanted to kind of blow that up and say, no, everybody is welcome to learn as much as they can, because where you are today in your career may be very different than what, your job title, says you're supposed to be doing. And so we've really appreciated how welcoming you've been to that philosophy as well. And knowing that when ELGL members engage with you, they might not be a finance director, and you're okay with that. So we appreciate that about you.
This is awesome. So many nuggets are coming out of here. Eric Keck and Mike Seaman. Kirsten, if you have not read Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan, he talks about radical transparency, access to information, and there's a lot of nuggets in what you're saying that are really connecting with me from other things that we're reading as well.
Good.
Moving to it, pivoting or jumping along, you've been incredibly successful at building community, just like you've discussed here. But it's true. I mean, talk about something else that's hard. Getting people together. There's so many places for people to devote their attention. And you've developed a real robust community, and it's been really cool to see. And we were just curious, how has COVID-19, how has all the issues of 2020 and our separateness impacted your approach to building and sustaining your community?
So we have long been doing, webinars, and we obviously have the GovLove podcast, and, our mechanism for sharing articles and information on our website has always been digital first. We've never really had, we're a paperless organization. We do have conferences, and we do have things like supper clubs, which are, informal meetups. And so obviously those in-person events all went away this year, but because we've always been digital first, it wasn't a huge adjustment for us to say, okay, we're going to start using, webinars to share information, or an online conference. So the technology wasn't the hard part. What we immediately focused on, and what I'm really proud of from this past year, was the almost immediate pivot to cover the issues that made 2020 what it was. And so, within a week of kind of the nationwide closure back in March, we had a webinar up, about using Zoom for online meetings. We had a podcast episode about, how a city in California took public testimony. When George Floyd was killed, we were immediately having conversations about, well, what does defunding police mean? And what can we do to be anti-racist in local government? And so for us, it was really about making those like super fast content adjustments, and then also recognizing that people needed information quickly. And so they couldn't wait for us to spend a month writing a report. And so we started using things like a shared Google Doc. We were like, drop in your emergency declarations here, drop in your continuity of operations plans here. And so people could share that really rapidly. And so I think that helped with that connectedness, because we weren't waiting to like get it perfect. We were like, just get it out. And like, could that Google Doc have like looked prettier? Like, maybe, but did it have all of the links in it that people needed to like, replicate their own COOP plan? Like, yes. And so, so for us, that was, a huge part of how we tried to adjust to 2020. And then obviously we did have to move our in-person events online. And so, just kind of tried new things and just said, let's go for it and figure it out. And so, but I think, our use of social media has helped us continue to have those personal connections with one another. And if anything, we've just really tried to promote that even more, and then, be there for people as they've, really struggled through this year, and use social media and then some of our connector programs to help people connect with each other.
The real-time nature, or the speed with which you were able to convene a conversation, prioritizing velocity over the aesthetic is a takeaway. And people need to talk. I mean, these things happen, and it's like, well, there's no outlet. I can't go to my conference and have a perfect panel on this in 6 months. Like, we're making policy choices right now.
Yep. Exactly. And I think what helps us is everyone on our staff has worked in local government. Everyone on our board is currently working in local government. And that's something that we prioritize, because it allows any of our staff member, whether it's our program directors or whether it's our digital coordinator, they can see a tweet that a member shares about a topic and really quickly say like, yes, this is absolutely applicable. Let's turn this into a virtual conversation, or let's turn this into a webinar. And so that's important. And, I feel really lucky because the ELGL board gives us a lot of flexibility to just run with things, because they know that we're trying to further the conversation. So they're always supportive of us having the conversation first and then figuring out how to pay for it later.
We wanted to ask you a related question. I wanted to bounce back. How has your experience as assistant city manager shaped your work at ELGL?
I know a lot of people say this, but like, being an assistant city manager is like the best job in local government, because you get to do like all of the really fun things without the without answering to 5 to 7 bosses. And so I feel like my time, it showed me that every single problem in local government isn't being solved in a silo. It's being solved across many departments. And so we need to bring as many voices to the table and as many perspectives as we can. It also showed that, sometimes that stress and the strain of local government work affects everybody differently. When you're proposing a new subdivision, the ways that planners get treated versus engineers versus permit techs versus, the city councilors, how do we make sure that we're building a support network that works for all of these different personality types and different skill sets, and how do we make sure that we support all of them in different ways. And then I think also, just being an assistant city manager is kind of like having a sandbox where you can try new things and you can try new programs. And, you know, that's often what an ACM or now I think an innovation director often does, which is how do we improve processes? How do we look at something that's happening and fix it? And so, you know, that's often an approach that we take at ELGL, which is to think of something different and then pilot it and try it and see how will this work. And so I think, you know, that was really influential too in, you know, how I tend to approach our work with ELGL. And we also try to run ELGL like our members experience. We try to have a very transparent budget process where I'll propose a budget and then we'll, you know, accept feedback on it and the board will approve it. And same thing with our strategic plan. That was a very inclusive process, you know, similar to what you might do working on a vision statement or a comp plan or something like that. And so try to just run the organization very similar to what our members experience in their local government.
You're like the ACM to us all. That's what you've created.
I love it. Yes.
You're in every organization, and here's the experiments to run. Here's the pilot.
Yes, exactly. Just go for it. Yeah.
All right. I'm understanding it more each day. And I also really liked your language on the pilots that you're trying to run. We talk about experiments a lot, and we have particular interest in a pilot an experience that you're creating, an educational format called the Level Up Cohorts.
Yes.
So this is new. This sounds cool. Can you give us a little bit about this?
So we were really inspired by the work that you're doing with some cities across the country around climate change and resiliency, and the ways that, you know, it's quite one thing to talk about those issues, but it's quite another to bake them into your budgeting, your prioritization. And so we love the work that you're doing. We think that there are local governments across the country that would be fascinated and interested as well. They may not have the same, you know, staffing capacity to potentially have, you know, a climate task force or a sustainability director, but they know that they want to prioritize those values. And so can they come together in one of our cohort programs and learn from the expertise that your team brings to build that into their budgeting and prioritization process and kind of reap that same benefit and have that same impact. And so our cohort programs have been hugely successful because it's that combination of knowledge, but then also friendship and networking. Our cohort members graduate from our programs having learned or gained a skill set, but then they've also gained a network. And so the idea that we can bring people together, they can learn from all of the experiences that you've had in some of these larger and I think, you know, kind of cutting edge cities and local governments, and then take that back to their own agencies is really exciting. So we're super excited for 2021. And again, the chance to just continue our work together and continue giving our members some experiences, you know, to not just learn, but to grow their networks in this field is really exciting.
I want to talk about ours in just a second because we're thrilled. We can't wait for it. I mean, so many reasons to look forward to 2021, but this is a big one. What have been some of the cohorts that you've gone through? Specific skill sets that you're describing?
Sure. So we started, our pilot cohort was around innovation. We were seeing our members who work in very large cities in innovation offices doing some really cool projects because they had an innovation director and they had a team of 10 and they got to go out and you know, solve problems and improve processes and try new things. But we also saw our members in smaller communities that had that same interest and passion and drive, but they're not a large enough community to like fully staff up an innovation agency. And so we said, well, what if we helped them create a decentralized innovation team? And so we brought together local governments from across the country, you know, from California to Maine, that wanted to have an innovation process, but we're never going to have that in-house. And so they became their own I-team, essentially decentralized. And it was from there that we really learned that if you bring people together and you give them, if you have an outcome-based like teaching approach or learning approach. And then you also give them the chance to get to know each other and become a network that they can talk to and rely on. We match them up with mentors from some of those larger communities that were already doing that type of work. And we just found it to be a model that matched all of our values related to education and connection. And so then in this past year, we've run cohorts on equity and inclusion, on water resources, on community engagement, strategic planning, on crisis management. And so through this process, not only have people participated and learned some really important and new skills, but then they also go on and they write for us about their experience or what they learned or how they're going to implement that. And so it's given us some content that for an average member that didn't participate, they can still learn alongside of them and find out more about crisis management or forced reallocation of resources. We did another cohort this year on creative placemaking, so using arts and culture in local government. So as we look ahead to 2021, we're going to continue down that path. And we have 5 umbrellas that our cohorts are based around: justice and equity, creative placemaking, resiliency, community engagement, and data citizenship. And so throughout the year, members can sign up to participate in these cohorts and learn from some of the brightest minds out there. And then again, make new friends and make new connections and, have a really strong network that they can look back on when they do that work in their own communities.
Kirsten, that's super cool. I get it. The name, the Level Up Cohorts, and the way that you framed it, you're articulate when you talk about the skill building or the skill sets that people are mastering, for example, around innovation. It makes total sense. It's not necessarily consulting, it's skill building, it's empowering organizations that everybody can do this, but there are skills to master.
Right, for sure. And I think, I always feel like I want to clarify that, I'm not saying that sometimes any of this is easy or that you can just participate in one course and you are, you've become a master. But I think that the economies of scale of recognizing that, the vast majority of communities in this country, don't have the resources to fully staff up different offices around, anything from innovation to climate change to race and equity. And so what could we do collectively together? How do we bring together people and then bring in those, again, those brightest minds, those top consultants, those top organizations to train, so more people or more organizations can get that, can get stronger and get better. And so we're not just limiting some of this innovation and resources and creativity to the largest organizations that have the budget to support them. And so that's what I'm really, excited about, because I think, again, it kind of democratizes or it equalizes the ability for any agency anywhere to become, really operating at its full potential.
Well, if it's okay, I would just love to say, this is our shameless plug moment. We're really thrilled to have a cohort that we're putting together with ELGL. It is around organizational resiliency through data at the program level. We will be highlighting the skills that we've seen from Ann Arbor, Michigan, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the way that they've said there is an immediate goal. We need resources to get there. So it's not forced reallocation, but intentional repurposing of our wealth as a community to try to pursue those goals that have a ticking stopwatch. We need to go forth and achieve them. And we're going to try to help bring to bear some of the skills that we've seen communities have through the cohort platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so excited about that. And again, it's just making sure that people who want to do great things, who want to learn new things, have a pathway to do that. We know that not every agency is going to then, perfectly model what Pittsburgh or Ann Arbor are doing, but we are, our vision statement for ELGL is to engage the brightest minds in local government, which is why I keep coming back to, we want to bring that knowledge and that information and have it so available for anyone who wants it. And so we think that this is a very accessible way for people to get there. And we're just pleased that we get to have another reason to partner with y'all.
So amazing. Thank you. I want to bring it back. There are so many questions that we've assembled and collected from some of the audience. One was simply about your notion of an accidental professional association. And you have talked about what inspired the establishment of ELGL and the accidental association, but I'd love to hear like the pivot to where does this accidental association go next? What's the future?
It's we often say that because when we started, back with those lunches and with the kind of early information exchanges, we weren't under the impression that we were like starting an organization that was going to, have thousands of members and that was going to have staff. And honestly, at first, the only reason we incorporated is because Kent and I were worried that we'd have like a slip and fall at one of the lunches and like we'd be held liable. And so it wasn't like we started down this path being like, we are going to like become this huge organization for local government networking. But I think what we've realized over time is that the need is there, and the ways that we're approaching things like information sharing and training and networking is really different than how it's been done. And people really want that. They expect that. Our membership is growing so fast that we've been able to, add staff and, really focus on developing a plan that meets those goals and interests that our members have around learning and connecting, and then also valuing diversity, and then also just having fun in local government. And so, we've just tried to kind of grow like as the work, or as the issues have come to us, and then, adjust along the way. We adopted our first strategic plan 2 years ago. We'll be doing an update next year. And really just trying to, reflect the reality of where we are, just so we can be really responsive. We did an exercise with our first strategic plan where we asked people to just give us, 2 or 3 words to describe the organization, and the concept of being scrappy, the concept of being nimble, and then the concept of just being authentic were really like some of those key things that came out. And so we try to just follow that, as we grow the organization or as we try new things. And I think that concept of being, scrappy and being nimble, and just being, ready to take what our members need and run with it, has really helped us, because people feel like they can see themselves in the organization, and they see that we're, not afraid to make fun of ourselves or not afraid to have some fun, things like City Hall Selfie Day. We definitely had people that were, looking down their noses at us for doing that when we first got started. Things like using a lot of like Parks and Recreation GIFs. People were like, what are they doing with all those GIFs? And you know what, we were like, it's fun, it's interesting, like, let's just have a good time. And oh, by the way, we're also developing some really high quality content that you can learn from and participate in. So I think as we look ahead, if anything, we just want to do more of what we've been doing, because we see the demand for it. And then we want to keep that feeling of authentic, real connections and friendships. So again, people have those 5 people in their lives that they can look back on and they can stay motivated by to stay in the field.
When you talk about being nimble and scrappy, it makes me think about you as ELG. You talked about earlier leadership of an organization reflecting its community, and this seemed to me to be about ELGL reflecting its community. The aspiration that we all have to maybe close the feedback loop a little bit faster than we've done before, to respond more effectively and authentically, to be nimble and scrappy and have some fun. These are values that we see in ELGL that make us proud to that you're reflecting those back to us. And I guess I would ask, one of our questions was, what advice, speaking of values, would you give? I have the question somewhere. If you could, oh shoot, where was it? I guess it was, if you could impact one change in your work with the public sector, what would it be?
I think some of it comes down to a willingness to try new things, and I don't want to say be unafraid of failure, because that is again baked into public work, where we are dealing with public resources, and so we want to make sure that things work the first time we try them. But I really want ELGL to be a place where, if you're considering trying something new or doing something different, you can find somebody else that's tried that before, or that tried it and failed, tried it and was successful. Maybe it's even working with a vendor, or maybe it's even a new approach to a problem. I want that to be a resource that our members can find, and so they don't feel so alone or worried or scared about change, that they feel like they can do what is absolutely the right next step for the situation that they're in. And so, there are a lot of times where someone is truly the first person to try something or do something. But, like the saying in government is that, like, no one wants to be first, but everyone wants to be second. And so I feel like, there are so many cases where you really are second. And so if we can connect you with the person that did go first and that you can learn from them, I would love to see that happen. And then also, just along the way, for you to find other people who share your passion for, whatever it might be that you're working on. And so you have that person or that network or that friend that you can rely on as you're working through, a new process improvement or a new software implementation or whatever that might look like. Just being able to find that person that you can ask questions of, or send a quick text to, or even just, be able to say, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated right now. And that person knows exactly what you're talking about. I think that that's what, I hope the most for our members, that they can find those people and those connections that they're looking for.
Totally awesome. Kirsten, we're getting close to the end of the exchange here. I wanted you to have last word. Were there any questions that you wish I would have asked? There were so many good ones that we had come in.
Ooh, so the one that I was prepared for was the quote that inspires
Yes.
me in work and life. And so I have two. So the first is familiar to ELGL because, and it's actually a Conan O'Brien quote, and it's, if you work hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen. And so that's why we put work hard and be kind on the bottom of all of our socks. I think that just by nature, people who work in local government are hard workers. They know that it's not going to be easy work. It's not going to be glamorous work. But we also think that kindness and, again, like making new friends is a huge component of success. And then the other quote that I have taped on my wall is from Buckminster Fuller. And the quote is, you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And so that's been a driver for us in, I often tell like new board members or new staff people, we don't have to run this organization like anything else. Like, we can do whatever we want, and we can build the organization we've always dreamed of. And so so that quote also inspires me in work and life. So that was the only question. You did such a nice job preparing me for this interview, so I appreciate that. Thanks,
Liz, and thanks, Eric. Kirsten, I can't end this on anything better than what you just did. I mean, those are heavy, and I'll be thinking about that. And I now know where the inspiration came from, the quotes on the bottom of the socks. So that's super cool.
Yes. Good.
A lot of mysteries solved in this.
There you go. Exactly. So we have to do another run of our socks. We actually are out of socks right now, but I'll have to figure out something great for 2021 so we can get more work hard, be kind socks out there.
ELGL hoodies, may I recommend?
Okay. Actually, yeah, you have your new apparel line, which is pretty impressive. So
following, I mean, just trying to be like ELGL, learning from the best. We're number 2.
Oh, masks. I like that, Liz. Liz just put it in the chat. You should make masks.
It's awesome.
Perfect.
Kirsten, thank you so much. This is absolutely wonderful. And you
Thank
shared
you.
a ton with our community, the local government community that we share and beyond. So we all have just immense gratitude for the work that you're doing and who you are. So thank you for joining our community here at ResourceX, and I can't wait to see you in person one of these days.
Hopefully soon. Yes, I appreciate it. Well, thanks to your whole team. We love working with you, and we're looking forward to all of our good work together in 2021.
Awesome. Happy holidays. Thanks again.
Thanks, you too. Take care. Bye, everyone.